Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon here in Loma Linda. So glad that all of you are joining us. My name is Philip Milosavljevic, if it's your first time, and we are doing another live Q&A. It is camp meeting season for us, and so we're thrilled that you've been joining us as we do every week. We'd love for you. Oh, look at what it is. I've got a guest with me. This is my daughter, Petra. And we're joining you from Loma Linda, but we'd love to know, where are you? Where are you right now in the world? And second thing, who are some of your favorite people and the moments you had with them? So I brought this little one with me. She's been a favorite of mine since she came out. Well, even before then. So we'd love to hear from you. But today we're going to be talking about community and the experience of that, particularly within church. And so we are having two really great. Okay, wow. We're going to have two really great guests with us besides Pastor Randy. One of them is Tommy Timalea. He's going to be one of our directors for our new contemporary service. And Pastor Joel Royer, who is our discipleship pastor and community. So we're thrilled to have both of them. All right, I think Mama's going to have to take you now, young lady. So I want to invite all of them to join me now.
Well, you can read it all over Philip's face. He's sitting here thinking, what am I supposed to do now?
I did not think she would be joining me. I left the garage door open where I am here.
That was quite the intro.
It's a good one. It's fitting, isn't it?
Very.
I think Petra stole the show. We'll have to.
I mean, this is what we have to deal with. We think we're on to talk serious things, and suddenly Petra's the star of the scene.
It's her.
Hi, Petra.
Hi, Petra.
All right. Oh boy. She doesn't want to go. She doesn't want to go. Bye, Petra. Bye bye. Oh.
Pastor Philip, someone commented that she's an up-and-coming speaker, so it looks like you're raising them fast. That's pretty good.
Oh, Jeanette, you're the best. She came over and helped watch Petra this week with her lovely husband, Reggie. So
beautiful.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining me today. Thank you, Pastor Randy, for a lovely message and community. Man, it's been really meaningful to get into these discipleship core elements that we have as a church. And I think what a fitting time to be talking about community.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. We made, in fact, Joel was key to this as our pastor for discipleship. We made a decision to focus on discipleship this camp meeting. What, Joel, a year and a half ago or more? I don't remember. It's been a long time ago.
It's been a while.
And then after that, to think of all of our values in terms of community. And then, wow, along came COVID-19, and now to try to focus on these values in terms of community is a very different reality.
Yeah.
But it's been a good one, actually, maybe forcing us to kind of think through what it means to live as disciples in community when we're not really in the kind of community we're accustomed to having. So yeah, it's challenging, but I think important.
Hey, now I know that the two of you, Joel and Tommy, you're kind of new to this show here. Joel, you're definitely old to our church.
Thank you.
Wait, what was that word?
Yeah,
I would not use that word.
How do I log off?
Oh, come on. Wait. Old to the church,
No,
I didn't say you're old, Joel.
Oh, old to the church. It's all right. I love you, Philip. We'll talk after this.
Tommy, you're a little newer, but hey, I want to just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and kind of what you're doing here.
Yeah, I just moved to Loma Linda about a couple weeks ago from Seattle. I was a pastor in Auburn, Washington,
Wow.
So yeah, it was a wonderful time there I had with that conference in the church. It was beautiful, but I'm excited to be here in Loma Linda now. So yeah.
Great to have you, Tommy. Get
Thank
down here where we have cool weather.
Yeah, I mean, and nothing but rain jackets the whole time since I got here. So
He told me that's the main reason why he moved, for the
Is
weather.
that so?
Oh man. Hey, did you hear what Monica just said about you?
Monica's standing up for you.
Pastor Joel has a young heart.
Thank you. That helps, Monica. She's old, but she has a young heart. Well, that's great. This is gonna be fun times.
You two go way back. You two go way back.
We do. I love Monica. We met in high school about 10 years ago, and it was a great time.
Oh man. What did that put Tommy at? 10 years ago he was in like kindergarten?
I was 13 10 years ago.
Oh,
13. I'm 23 now. So.
Beautiful.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for being yourselves. I'm glad you didn't leave that behind.
Wow, look at this, Philip. Silvia Aguiar Velasco from Ecuador.
Wow.
That's wonderful. I have somebody from
Why don't we read through some of these together? If you guys just call them out, where people.
Marilyn Jerome from Cochrane, Alberta. Who else do we have here? I saw Eduardo Bouillon, I think, again. I forget where he's from. I remember seeing his Ron Bacon from down toward the coast, down where it's a little cooler here. San Juan Capistrano. Wow.
Bob Rova from Deerwood, Maryland. Welcome. Welcome. And hi, Petra from Newfoundland.
Yeah,
Wow.
I saw that one.
I love it. Pastor Randy quoted Demi Lovato, says Victor, he must really be relevant and in touch.
Thank you, Victor.
I was quite shocked myself.
Shocked.
Whoa.
Oh,
Pastor
my goodness.
Randy Roberts.
There we go. Eduardo Bouillon. I'm from Lima, Peru, the
That's
city,
right.
city and country of my wife's birth.
That's right.
Dave Bell from PUC. I love watching Dave and Heritage on.
Yeah. We love
YouTube.
Dave. Hi, Dave.
Yes, we do. And then
Tiffany,
Tiffany Parkinson.
watching from Jamaica.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Great to have you,
Long
Tommy.
time ago.
Someone's asking, what position are you doing?
Well, this is a great plug. I will be helping with the new service for Anthem that Loma Linda University Church is starting. So that's headed up by Josh Jameson. So
Excellent.
it'll be fun.
So
wonderful,
glad.
Tommy.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, guys, why don't we jump into our questions today that we have? And if those of you watching would like to comment and even add your own questions relating to community in particular, we'd love to have those. So if you three would think of a season in your life, potentially where you found yourself in a lonely space, what happened? What did you learn while you were in that time? How did you grow almost maybe through it? I could say Joel.
You want me to start that one, huh? Well, there have been a number of seasons of loneliness, actually, but I think one of the most impactful times for me actually happened to be in the church, which we can think of as kind of weird, but it was just a time that some very, I would say, hurtful different things in church were taking place. And, it was a place in my life that made it hard to talk to people because it involved a lot of people around me from within the church. So I think, and in fact, I remember one time very specifically, I had a friend with me and I had gone down, there wasn't any seats available. I kind of like to sit in the back or on the sides. And one of the deacons said, "Oh, I have some seats you guys can sit at," and took us all the way down front and like in the middle of the section. And I was already feeling pretty emotional at this point, and went and sat down, and I thought, oh, this is not the exact location that I want to be. And then throughout the service and then the sermon, it just really hit me. And I'm a pretty, well, you guys may disagree, but I'm pretty controlled, and I share things with very few people, things of great importance. I kind of have that layer around me. I hold it very close, and so I don't share a lot with a lot of people. And something just happened in the service that I just started to cry. And I felt it coming, and I was like, no. And I just started crying. And everyone started looking at me. And, I always try to be poised and do that stuff at home, where no one can see me. And here I had just exposed myself that something was not right. And I literally had to get up, and I just put my head down, and I went to the back of the church and left.
Wow.
But it was a season of loneliness personally, but within the church. And I think oftentimes that happens to a lot of people, because the things that we are going through sometimes happen with the people in the church. And so as much as the church is to be the community, sometimes that can be the hardest place. And what I learned through that experience is there are still safe people in the church. There are still people who love and care, and you have to be willing to let yourself be real, and sometimes let the walls down for people to know what is going on in your life, so that they can then minister to you. Because if they don't know, and you hold everything on, you hold on to it tightly, and no one knows, they don't know how to help you, basically, how to pray for you, how to encourage you. And you can oftentimes feel much more lonely. And sometimes it's like, for me, it was my own fault, a lot of it, because I didn't know how to share with people what I was going through.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Joelle.
Yeah.
I think just to make one comment, and then one others of you can share. It is seemingly just so much more scary and frightening to reveal what's really going on, though deep down inside, I think there's this feeling that if I could just tell somebody, I think I'd feel better. But there's just so much apprehension on our parts sometimes to be vulnerable. And it almost is strange to be vulnerable with people you're more willing to tell a counselor than you would sometimes to tell another individual that's in your sphere. Yeah, I'd love to get into that later on a little bit, but maybe one of you could share one more story.
I'll talk maybe not about just one time in my life, but one role in my life. I can remember early on in my tenure here at LOUC, having the opportunity to sit and talk with somebody for whom I had and have a huge amount of respect, Dr. Lynn Behrens, who was the president of LOUH for some years. Pardon me. And I was talking with her. I don't know all the details, but we must have been talking about her leadership here and then my role at the church and so forth. And she said something to me that has rung in my ears many times, including even recently. She said to me, "Randy, leadership is lonely." Because her implication was there are decisions that you have to make and things you have to do that others will neither understand nor appreciate. And she said, leadership is lonely. And I've learned over the years that there's a great deal of truth to that.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a profound space to find yourself in when you feel as though the buck stops with you, and therefore you have to make calls that unfortunately others can't do. And yet, how do you find, I guess, a sense of camaraderie when you're doing that? Is there even anything that you can that kind of makes you feel connected?
Well, if you're talking, where does one find connection and comfort
In
in
leadership in particular, I'm thinking.
on leadership? Because
Yeah.
obviously there's one's family,
Oh, yeah.
there's one's spouse, there's one's kids, those kinds of connections. But if you're talking about professionally speaking, then I actually, Tommy is is new among us, so I haven't had the privilege of getting to know him as well as I will in days to come, and I look forward to that. But actually, Philip, it's people like you, it's people like Joel, it's people like our other colleagues on the staff. That community it's difficult for me to put into words just how much each member of that community means to me. And so the ability to be in leadership together, to be able to process things, especially things that are difficult, together, to feel like there are others that are connected with that same situation. And it kind of moves around a bit because different ones of us are in different areas of ministry. So I may know a lot more about some issue with you, Philip. Maybe it touches young adults, or with Joel that touches larger church issues because of discipleship, or with some other member of our staff because of the connections in that part of ministry. And then sometimes it's all of us together. But I'll have to tell you, those connections are critical to emotional survival. They just are.
Amen. Thank you for sharing that. Tommy, you got one that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, briefly. I don't want much wiser people are on this call.
No.
Come on, man.
Older, not white.
Oh, right. I think probably in recent memory was when I first started as a pastor. Just graduated Walla Walla University. Last year was my first, so I just completed 1 year of being a pastor up in Washington. And I think when I had gotten there, the senior pastor was on sabbatical. So I walked into the church. I didn't know anyone at the church. I didn't know anyone who lived around the area. The pastoral staff, he was on sabbatical, so he wasn't around. So it was kind of just me and the church that I was pastoring. Like, I think the median age was about 75. We didn't have money Sabbath school, so it was a much older church. And so there was about a month of where I was trying to figure out how do I fit in, what roles do I play, and it felt pretty isolated and lonely at the time. And so, funny enough, I think I kind of defaulted to, I just called up some of my friends who were pastors, who were in similar situations, and I said, guys, and girls, there was guys and girls. I said, what are we going to do to fix this? And so we just started having weekly meetings where we kind of brainstormed and worked on some material together to try to get all of our sermons kind of lined up. It was something that helped bridge a professional community. Reached out to the networks we have. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's good.
It's interesting how you feel as though sometimes as a pastor, it's difficult to know who you can be authentic with, and will that cross a boundary that you shouldn't? And that's a tough line at times. And I know that in seminary, some individuals advocated, hey, it's probably best not to jump into too many friendships and relationships with church members. And then there were other professors, I remember, they were like, no, it's good for you to build those roots with people who are there and let them know you deeply and you them. But
in fact, Philip, my parents, pardon me, in their generation, my dad was a pastor, in their generation, were taught, I think it must have been as a standard matter of course in college as he was taking theology, do not become friends with your members. Just do not. And there is something to that in the sense that it can make things less complicated. If you do have to make leadership decisions, they're difficult. But I'm here to tell you that is not survivable as a human being.
Mm.
It's not a healthy thing as a human being.
And if you think about just, I guess, the notion of church and community, that is one of the things we prize. But why is it that, I guess you could say, there is this sometimes lack? Joel, you pointed out just beautifully in your story. Why is it that there are just challenges to attain this sense of belonging in community within a church setting? Where does that come from? How does that happen?
I think it's, I mean, I've heard from various people that, you know, share their stories within the church. And I think the expectations that they feel people have on them, you know, the expectations of having their lives in order and together, and that they don't struggle because they're, you know, it's a Christian environment, and they don't struggle. They're not supposed to struggle with some of these things that the world does. And if they let down those walls and they express to someone, you know, what they're going through, or maybe the struggles that they're having, oftentimes it's not returned with, it's not safe. Oftentimes they have found themselves in a deeper state of depression, if you want to call it, because of the response of others toward the information that they now have. So I think sometimes, I mean, I've seen it so many times, even with divorces within the church, you know, husband and wife go to the same church, there's a split in a marriage, and all of a sudden, all of those friends that were in the same friendship circles, all of a sudden there's this divide and this division, and it creates angst, and it makes people uncomfortable to come to church because they don't know where they stand. They don't know how people feel about them. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes they feel that love is conditional instead of unconditional in a church. And you know, we're all human and broken. As pastors, we're just as human as everyone else. And it takes intentionality to put your feelings, your expectations aside, and really walk with people where they are at. It can be challenging, but I think expectation. Yeah, I don't know, Randy, you were going to say something.
I would jump in on what Joel is saying and agree with that, because when you come to church, especially if you're looking at a denomination like ours, a Seventh-day Adventist, where there is clearly an expectation that what we believe will deeply affect how we live. And the truth is, all of us will have times when we're struggling with certain facets of the discipleship journey with Jesus. Times when we have failed or messed up. And yet, if there's a premium placed on successfully overcoming temptation to the degree that when you fail, it's not okay, then you just hold that inside. You don't share that with anyone. In fact, it becomes not only not sharing it with someone, it becomes necessary to hide it from people. And so the more you hide that, the more you're aware of being cocooned off in your own world. And the more cocooned off you are in your own world, the less you connect with anyone else. And so the loneliness grows. I think she's exactly right there.
I think it's challenging for people because you know, when you talk about community, the beauty of community is you find, when you're able to share, you find people who have gone through similar circumstances and situations. So you find kind of a cheerleading team, people who are maybe further down the road that can actually help you navigate through what you are going through. But oftentimes I really feel that silence is a big creator of loneliness, and our silence creates that deeper void within us, because there's nothing like having, you don't even have to share to the depth or to the level, but knowing that you have a team that is praying for you, that is rooting you on, that maybe even is holding you accountable. Maybe it's something in your life that is destructive or that is not helpful for you, and you can find people in community that love you despite that, but encourage you and help you to be better at whatever that is that you're struggling with. Sometimes things are they're too big. They're just too big to carry alone, is the bottom line.
Oh, go ahead, Philip.
I just wonder if maybe we approach church incorrectly in some way, in the sense that we come to church feeling as though the facade is what is expected. And when we think of what people are saying now, oh, you need to be vulnerable, you need to be this, but it's like, I was never taught that. I was never modeled that. That's not what I thought church was. It was about me going here for God. Now you're saying it's about this bigger thing. I mean, how does someone resonate through that? It's almost like we have to retrain ourselves to understand what is the purpose of church. And in the light of COVID, I think some of that then emerges, because we saw this exponential rise in viewership in the first month of church worldwide. Any denomination, every denomination, people were just seeing anyone who was online, they were watching. Churches that could broadcast, people were watching. Whether it was through a cell phone or high performance production, people were watching. And then it was just this rapid decline, below even levels of what churches were seeing prior to COVID, when people were attending church. And it makes me realize, when I think about this, I guess I would love to hear from what you think, but it almost seems as though the elephant in the room was not addressing how to do community well, and how to value, I guess, church community in a way that, hey, this is what church is about as well. But I think it was spoken about just simply by people not viewing anymore, because this is not really what church is about. It's not just me watching something.
Right.
It's about me collectively experiencing something with people that I love and care for. I don't know.
I'd be curious to hear from Tommy. One of the things that honestly was counterintuitive to me anyway, I had been aware of this before, but it came out more clearly this week as I was preparing and speaking on loneliness. I came across different studies and surveys and so forth, literature that indicated that among the loneliest generations are our youngest generations. Millennials, Gen Zs, who consistently report higher levels of loneliness than any other generation, with the exception of the truly elderly generations. I'm curious, Tommy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is interesting. I'm no sociologist, so I don't have any studies. I think though, in Seattle, it's one of your younger cities in our country. And there's a term that we use there. I don't know if you've heard of it, but we call it the Seattle freeze. And so average time you live in Seattle is about 5 years, is how long a person lives there. Because usually if they go to Seattle, they're there at Google, Microsoft, Amazon. They work in one of those tech industries, and then they want to start a family eventually and move out to somewhere else in the country. But usually, so it's a very young city. But we have a thing called the Seattle freeze, and it's because although everyone's young, there's almost no interaction with people.
Wow.
And so and I can send you articles on it, but there's articles I'm writing about how unique Seattle is, and nobody communicated with each other. So if you go to a coffee shop and there's an open table or something like that, and usually, and if it's a crowded place before COVID, you would sit there at the table with the person, maybe talk or just work on whatever. But that doesn't really that was not the culture in Seattle. Is one person would sit there and they would take up a whole table, and there wasn't really any sharing or communicating or anything like that. And so I definitely resonate with that. My generation, I'm Gen Z, we do there is a lack of communication. I don't know if it's from maybe our cell phones. I don't know. I'm not a sociologist, but there is definitely a lack of community that exists.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I saw somewhere this week, I saw a picture. The caption was, for a future time, hopefully sometime soon, said, "COVID is over. We can be together again." And it had a group of friends all around a restaurant table, and every one of them's on their cell phone. It's like, so we can be together again, but man.
I know my mom would get upset with us. She would say, I want us to spend family time together. And so we said, oh, okay. So we'd all go to the living room, and within 5 minutes of talking, we all just sat there on our phones eventually.
I think your mom and my wife have been talking.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man.
I once heard, Philip, somebody say that loneliness is the sense of not being meaningfully connected to anyone else. I've appreciated that definition over the years because it allows for what I think is a very common experience. And Joel kind of highlighted it, and that is you can be around people. In fact, you can be around a lot of people and still be deeply lonely. You can be at a church, even a large church service, a couple thousand people around. You can be at a football game. You can be people everywhere, and yet inside you feel like no one is listening, no one's connected, no one understands. I am all alone. And I was struck by what I talked about today with Al Worden, the BBC calling him the loneliest man in history, and yet he would say that when he was on the backside of the moon orbiting, he was alone. He said, but I wasn't lonely. In fact, he said it was the best part of the trip.
That was such an interesting way of thinking about it. Lonely versus alone.
Right.
I loved hearing that.
And then him saying that as he saw that module disconnecting, other than just hoping everything went well, he thought, good, they're gone. Now I have this place to myself for 3 days. It's like, you're 250,000 miles from home, and you're saying, now I got this place to myself. It's like, wow.
Wow.
Sounds like something you would have said, Randy.
Hey.
Oh, shots fired, Joel. I think there's something to the reality that he brings up. Hey, we were in real close quarters. I need some time for myself. And I think that's okay to experience. How does that work within a church community where you just say, you know what? These aren't the people I really feel like I want to be sharing with. There are other people I want to find spiritual and nurturing from.
I just read a quote by Eugene Peterson, and as with any writer, I don't endorse every single thing he ever wrote, but I'll tell you that Peterson has been a deep blessing to me. A quote where he says, the church is this ragtag group of people that I might never choose myself to be with, to hang with. I might want another group or other people or more with it, individuals or whatever. But this is the church God has given me, and it is here where I will decide whether or not I'm going to grow as a disciple or not. Now, those are my own words, but that's the essence of what he said. And I thought, boy, that is so true. Because if everybody thinks like me, acts like me, believes like me, looks like me, that's not a church, that's a clique.
Oh, wow.
And, a clique is a very dangerous thing, because when you're in, you're in. But boy, you do the wrong thing and you're out, you are really out.
Right.
So,
Wow.
Just want to let's look at some of these comments that have come in here. Just want to mention to a few of you, Becky, we'd love to connect with you. I see your comments on here. Please give a call to the church, and love to set up a time where we can actually talk and be part of the journey, whether it's for you or someone that you were thinking of.
yes. And then Sonia Giles, I think, highlights what we were talking about, what Tommy was saying. I wonder if part of the cause for loneliness in the younger generation is all the technology. They don't talk face to face anymore. Phones. Sounds like what we were talking about.
We have
Tom.
FaceTime now. We don't need to talk. No. I did bring up technology, but I will say I don't think technology is a bad thing. I think it's
Right.
very good thing. I think with anything, it just has responsibility.
Absolutely. And then Martha Salcedo, Philip, why don't you read her
Martha.
comment?
Oh,
Why didn't you ask me to?
un saludo muy especial para la persona que está escuchando este programa Descende, el lugar donde nací.
You're really good. So she says, I'm not sure who she's speaking to, but she says a very special greeting to the person who's listening to this program from the land where I was born. So,
Oh, Peru maybe? Or what's the flag there? I can't see.
I'll let Joel share that with us. I don't want to answer.
I can't
Colombia. I also just want to comment here. Silas, good to see you, brother. He is the librarian there at Andrews University. Became a friend of mine. He makes a comment here. Community. Can we learn something from the early church?
Oh my goodness. You read about the early church in Acts. It was a thriving community. So true.
The notion that they shared everything in common, that always got me, and I think still does. The idea that if I have need, my brother or sister who's next to me will meet that need, whether it be financial or relationship or just in any way. They sold out their goods to be a blessing to each other. I mean,
that's powerful. I want to look at the statement that Margaret Lagos makes. Pardon me, that's a sobering comment.
I see it.
See if I can find it here again. As a fourth generation SDA, hang on, my screen moved and I lost it here. See if I can recover it. As a fourth generation SDA, the loneliest years have been when I was a church secretary. Churches are very cliquish here. Wow, that's not a good reflection on what we're called to be. And yet, Philip, you were talking about the early church in Acts 2 and 4 in those paragraphs that so clearly highlight the community that they felt. And yet, throughout the biblical narrative, you find that kind of community kind of shifting and almost amoeba-like. In the Old Testament, at times, it was this entire people that was huge. And then at other times you find it's just a family. And then in Acts, it's the early church. So I think the expressions of the body of Christ can shift and change depending on maybe many factors. But the underlying reality for what we're talking about today is that question, am I meaningfully connected to people?
Wow.
I think that's... Go ahead, Tommy. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
You're wiser.
Oh,
I'm going to let you go ahead and go.
Thank you. I remember in studying for my undergrad, one of our professors was reading from a book, and it was this great study that someone had done on how in the early church, post-Acts, the book of Acts, how they brought in people to the church. And he made sure to highlight that they weren't focused on trying to convert people into the mission. Their focus was, we want to live as a community that would naturally draw people in. And so if somebody wanted to come into the community, he said that they first had to be sponsored by somebody in the Christian faith. And that person would study with them and walk with them. And they became so intimately connected that there are several accounts that the new person being brought in would be captured or taken, to be killed, to become a martyr, that the person who was sponsoring them would willingly, voluntarily go with them into the Colosseum and would be killed alongside them, because being a part of that community, being part of somebody, was that important to the early church. And I think that's something that we could learn from in a way.
Have mercy. That's powerful, Tom.
That was very powerful.
Wow. Hey, Joseph Mann says something here. What do you think about this? Perhaps the best way to address the clique issue is to stop belonging to a church and instead join a movement that has a job to do.
That's it. Kind of gets right to the heart of the issue, doesn't it?
Yeah, I see two things with that. There's a big part of me, I'm like, absolutely, that's right. You know, it's not about just joining this church, which is sometimes some people think of as a club, and it feels as though you're just speaking to each other. There's this mission-mindedness that's left. But I think I am more willing to die alongside the people next to me when they are my friends. I think there's part of this where we've forgotten the notion of family. Ellen White talks about how the youth, if rightly trained, are an army for the Lord that will just, bless the earth. And this phrase was taken by various youth leadership individuals, and it was just in mass. It's still used very widely. And while I don't disagree with the statement, I also think she makes so many beautiful statements about how youth are also part of a family, and they're part of a family of God. And we don't seem to emphasize this notion of family within community as much. And that, I think, is an unfortunate reality, because the New Testament speaks to the church as being what? The bride of Christ. That's a relational term. While it's also there that there are military terms used, I think we have to balance that within this notion of, I want to do mission with the people that I absolutely love and care for. But even if no one goes with me, I'll still go. You talk about the title of this series, The Journey Alone Together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joel, you were going to say something a couple of moments ago.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things that come to mind, but as Joseph had said, the church versus a movement, I think the church should be a movement. I find it hard to separate the two of those, but our churches should be huge movements, not just for programming. And I think that goes back to one of the questions you had raised, Philip, about why viewership is dwindling. Because programming cannot do it all. It's not our everything. And when you come to church, there is a whole nother element that you are experiencing alongside the program. You walk in the doors, you're seeing your friends, you're giving hugs. How was your week? Do you want to go on a picnic, go out to lunch? And watching online, everything, Satan is so amazing. When I sit and I look at the state of our world and I look at everything that is happening, it just feels to me so strategic in hitting every single mark that takes human beings down. And one of those, the biggest things, is relationships, because now our work is online, our church is online, we're sequestered in our homes, many alone, some with, obviously with their families, but for the church, and I can only speak for my department, but I saw it all over our church campus. So hospitality is one of the things under discipleship that is huge in a church, meeting members, greeting guests, all of this sort of thing. But it was huge in our size of church to create smaller communities. And so it was very important to create windows of time on Sabbath where our teams could come together and maybe have a little bit of food together and to talk and to pray and to exchange between each other outside of doing their job, which is maybe passing out the bulletins or, the actual greeting. And so I think people are missing that right now. They are missing that hug. We are most of us are created for touch, and not in an inappropriate way, but to have those hugs, to have that handshake. That's a part of who we are as human beings, and there's a lack of that. So I honestly think what I have been seeing is that people are still watching. They may watch at different times, but they're trying to find those places where people are now, going with a group outside in nature to the beach, or going up to the mountains on a hike where they're actually interacting, seeing people. Like what we're doing right now, I think is huge because it's not pre-recorded. There's a chance to interact even though it's virtual. So this is a huge step with being able to interact and talk. But I have a lot more to say, that I'm gonna stop because I don't want to dominate the conversation.
That was good.
No, I agree, Joel, very much with what you're saying. I can remember times in my growing up years, probably the preacher up front, or maybe the Sabbath school teacher up front, people making what are almost, as I look at it now, disparaging remarks about the fact that people came to church to see people. You're here to see God, you're here to worship God, and it doesn't matter who else is here, and so forth. Well, I understand that sentiment because at the core it's true. Worship is Godward. It's focused on God. That's what has principally and primarily brought us here. But I no longer agree, and stopped agreeing many years ago, with the second part of that sentiment, which was you're not here to see people. Truth is, you are, just like you have outlined, Joel. We're here because God created us as communal creatures. We need that interaction, that proximity, that touch. I remember years ago when I was working as a hospital chaplain, and if somebody asked me this, I won't be able to answer it. I don't know if I could ever find it again, but a survey that was done asking family members of trauma victims who were in the ICU what their most important needs were. And there were three: proximity, information, and hope. And I go back to that first in proximity. They needed to be close. I can remember so many times walking down the hallway outside of ICU. Down the hallway, there was a family room where people could gather. But time and again, the family members were not down there. They were congregated up by the doorway into ICU. They couldn't get in at that particular hour, but there they were. Now, why aren't you just 25 paces down the hallway where there are seats? Well, they need proximity. They need to be close. I think they're in a different world, in a different way. The same thing is true with us as spiritual creatures. We need that connection. We need that closeness. And that's why almost everywhere we go as pastors these days, question number one is, when are we getting back together? And I get that. Yeah. I totally understand that. So I agree with you, Joel. We're not just there. We're there to worship God. Absolutely. That's the core. But I would say it maybe this way today. Part of worshiping God, a key part of it, is not doing it just alone, but doing it with others.
Yeah.
Do you feel as though church being deemed kind of non-essential has set a tone about the importance of community in society, or do you think it, well, maybe this may get into a political thing, I don't know.
Pastor Philip, where are you going?
Yeah, okay, I'll backtrack.
Go ahead, Philip. We'll let Tommy and Joel answer that one.
Oh, good, okay.
It's all Tommy's.
Oh man, but the notion that I think where some people really get alarmed and offended and frustrated is when government officials deem churches non-essential.
Yeah.
Call them spaces that are, just not the center of society. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. This was vital to my existence, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and in every and any way. And so when we find the term church, non-essential. Hospital, absolutely. This notion that church can be a spiritual hospital isn't necessarily practically relevant to many in government societies. So
no, I think you're exactly right. No question about that. I think, to be real honest, what I wrestle with and what I try to be attentive to, and in fact, it happened just, I think it was this week, texting back and forth with a number. We're in a blessed community here in the sense that we have a wealth of medical knowledge, of scientific knowledge, and many of our church members, many of our friends are scientists or physicians, and they are that with a heart for Jesus. The church is not non-essential, to use a double negative, in their lives. It is essential, and yet they're also excellent scientists. And so I've been communicating with 2 or 3 of them that are meaningful in my own life, and they're saying, yeah, you know, this, we understand how people are saying it's just about government versus church. One of, in fact, my friends who's an ICU physician said, the people who say just that are not here in the ICU watching people die. This is real, and this is deadly, and it is dangerous to many. And so then I come back to thinking, really what we want to do is we want to express neighbor love. And neighbor love does mean caring for some of the more vulnerable among us. Philip, I would feel very different about this if the government's going to say what the government's going to say. That doesn't change the reality that is true in the heart of the believer. It is essential to us.
Yeah.
But I would feel very differently if the government were saying, you may not worship God. You may not. That's against our government mandate. You are not to worship. You're not to go to worship. You're not to do it in private. That's a whole different ballgame. Right now, for all of its selfishness, for all of its egotism, for all the other things that's a part of every government, some are trying to say we're trying to contain the spread of this. We're trying to keep people healthy and get through this. I can connect with that in many ways. I understand the angst and the anger and all the rest. I get where that comes from. But for me, the first ones that I really turn to are the scientists, especially those that I know and trust, and say, help us as pastors, help those of us who are not in the medical community. Help us understand the best ways to be thinking about this right now.
Yeah.
Philip, you know that. You're married to one of them.
I am. You know, at the very beginning, she was very apprehensive about just anything and everything. I think as we're learning more, there's a greater sense of openness, but there's also, hey, you still need to be thoughtful. So our young adult ministry taking the opportunity to say, hey, let's be thoughtful about this, keep masks on, but we'll start doing some kind of gathering.
Right.
And that I think is the blessing that, hey, you have the great outdoors, just do it at night because it's blistering hot during the day.
Yeah, no, and if you heard Doug announce on our broadcast this morning about ways that now, as our building becomes increasingly and finally totally available to us, we may have some options that we otherwise didn't have. And so absolutely.
Yeah. But I think overall, it has caused a lot of emotional and mental health issues. I see a comment here from Ron Bacon. The increase in youth suicide is also very real. The increase in alcohol and drug use is real among unreported associated deaths from them.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to hear from you guys, maybe just on one more question. How can the church become more intentional about how it provides community? That's one. Feel free to answer. Or how do people step into community when they don't know how, or feel pushed out, or just simply ignored?
I really believe Joel was wanting to answer that.
I felt that coming. You know, I honestly, you may have a problem with what I'm going to say, but I have a really hard time when I hear people say, what can the church do, or the church needs to be doing this or that, because let me clarify why. The church needs to be a resource and a support, but the church is the people. And it's so hard when the church is looked at as just being the pastoral staff,
Hmm.
providing everything. And I think if people, at least for myself, not going to church every weekend has really shed light. I've had to self-reflect at how dependent I was on the church
Hmm.
to feed me, to hold my hand. And I think there is an important element to the church doing that. But the church cannot be everything. Like, I think it's unhealthy for people to want the church to be their everything. There is a give and a take, I feel. I am very blessed by the members of the church, by their notes, by their involvement, by them sharing their gifts, by them sharing their talents. It has fed me. It has sustained me. And I think that this is a time that everyone really needs to be looking within themselves, saying, what has God given me? Who has he created me to be? How am I a part of the church? And how can I contribute in these times that we're living in? We may not be meeting in the church like we typically are. Maybe I was a greeter. Maybe I was a deacon. Maybe I was this or that, whatever the role was. Maybe I was simply a participant who came in, sat down in the pew, and then left, regardless of why you went to church or what you did when you went to church. I think right now during this season, until the church doors open everywhere, I know some are meeting, we need to look within and say, I am the church. What is God calling me to do right now? I may be lonely. I may be feeling lonely. Is sitting here feeling sorry for myself going to help me? Or is there something that I need to be doing to get outside of myself and someone else that I can help? I think that we need to be very intentional and very diligent, and I'm speaking to myself, on how we can be the church in these times. It's not going to look the exact same, but it is vital for our own spiritual well-being and the spiritual well-being of those around us, that we are searching, that we are being creative, and that we are not becoming complacent and stagnant and bitter and all of that, but that we are looking forward to seeing what we can do. It starts with me. What can I pray in the morning? God, what do you want today to look like? I have my list of to-dos. Is there someone that you would like to place on my heart that I need to call? Not only call, maybe I need to go drop something off at their house. Maybe if they're comfortable, I need to invite them for a meal outside that's 6 feet away. I think we need to be very intentional in being connected with God so that he can speak to us and use us to be his church in these times.
Wow. Joel, do you want to preach that on September 5 or September 12? That's wonderful. That's so true.
You know, our outreach ministry just over the last few years has seen so much done in terms of our homeless outreach, and in particular now with Fusion Ministries. And one of the things they continually put up on their social media, if you haven't followed Fusion Ministry, you got to do it. They say the church is not closed, the people are still at work. You know, and I think that is so important when we recognize, hey, we kind of label the church as this being of its own that has legs and arms, but really it's like human beings, like you're saying, Joel, and we've got to be on it. When the Holy Spirit prompts you, hey, you know that one guy who's sitting in the front pew, I wonder how he's doing, and then you just let that thought pass. No, it's the Holy Spirit reminding you. Jump on that, find that person, email them, reach out. You saw that one girl who was crying at church, then that go reach it. You know, I think that's really a pet peeve of mine as well, Joel, that we leave the work of ministry to paid pastors, but forget, hey, there's a lot of pastors in the church. Every one of us is a pastor, priesthood of all believers.
Well, that's the essence of what Becky Murdoch is saying. I lost it now because my screen, it moved, but here it is. It says, but isn't that where pastoral mentorship comes in, to equip the saints for ministers? Ephesians says, how are we discipled into discovering our talents? And I know Becky has a real heart for that, and she is correct.
Yes.
That is a key facet of what we need to be doing. Tommy, I heard one preacher put it this way, that about this time of social distancing, the church has left the building, but it's still the church. It now needs to be out there doing.
Right. I love that.
Work of the church.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, friends, for talking through some of these things. This was a really meaningful time. Any kind of last thoughts or recommendations you would leave with people in the space of social distance and how community can still happen, or any other thoughts?
Boy, there are just so many good comments, Philip. We were overwhelmed with them today. We couldn't get to all of them, but some really good theology in those comments, including that last one. Hola, saludos desde Colombia. Melissa Paz. That's the land of my birth. So
that's awesome. Joel, I thought I saw you thinking, Tommy. I saw something coming out, but I don't want to stop you.
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, I think Joelle really summed it up. We could have ended right after she gave that wonderful thing about us being the church instead of just going to church. I think that's important, and I think to again, not to get political with the word essential, because I know it's used tons of different ways, but I remember sitting, because my context is Washington. We were sitting at the church, and when we heard that our church was deemed unessential, I remember being filled with emotion, thinking, not so much, like, oh man, we don't get to meet, but it was more of, have I, as a pastor, did I fail my community and not letting them know that, and them not thinking that what we're doing is essential.
wow.
Did I fail them? And I think as any leader, we can look at ourselves as, have we failed our communities in not being essential? Is there stuff that we can do? And like you said, can we invite people over? Can we provide a place for them, some sort of community? I think that's all of our calling. Feed them when food shortages are around. But I think, what can we do? And that's always what I try to look at.
Love
Hey,
that.
Philip, Joel on September 5, Tommy on September 12.
No.
Perfect.
It's a good one, sir. I was just going to add to what Becky said about, aren't the pastors supposed to be mentoring and equipping? I fully agree with Becky on that. I know that it's really hard for churches right now, obviously not being together, but I'm wondering how that would look right now, because there may be people that are wanting to do something but don't know what or how. And I'm wondering, as pastors, maybe that's a conversation we need to have at one of our meetings. How does it look to mentor and equip people during this time for ministry, for them to feel supported and feel like they have a place where they can ask questions, to feel more equipped to do what they feel God is calling them to? I honestly, I don't know what that looks like during this time, but I think we can definitely come up with something. We have to think outside the box during these times.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean ministry has to stop. We just need to get creative and think outside the box.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love you, Becky. Thanks for your comments.
And thank you to Susan Stadola. We will have a good time. Thank you. She knows what I mean by that.
Well, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. There are so many quotes and comments. I hope everyone's reading through some of these. Beautiful time today. Thank you. God bless you. We will see you again next Saturday, same time, same place. Bye-bye.
All the best.
Bye.